Welcome back, everyone. Very good afternoon. Our afternoon session opens with one of the most significant development in the UK-India commercial story of the decade. UK-India Free Trade Agreement, the next inflection point. Two massive economies have agreed to make it easier to do business with each other. Tariffs, services, investments, mobility, all changing. For us as advisors, this is the next 5 years of practice for many of us.
To begin with, I'm pleased to announce our moderator and panelist, Mr. Vinay Agrawal, who is the Chief Financial Officer at BNP. Vinay sees billions move across borders every day. He knows where the friction is. He knows where the opportunity lies. And he knows where the real impact of an FTA will lie. He's a chartered accountant, so we can trust that he will cut through the jargon and make things clear for us. Please welcome Mr. Vinay Agrawal.
Thank you.
Our next panelist, Mr. Amit Jain. He is senior partner at EY, leader of EMEA India desk. 25 years of cross-border work between Europe, the Americas, and India. He is amongst the most experienced practitioners of UK-India corridor. If the FTA is the map, we can ask Amit to draw the route. Please welcome Mr. Amit Jain.
Now, next, I'm pleased to welcome Lord Krish Rawal. Lord Krish is the sitting member of the House of Lords, and he's here today on our panel. How often does that happen? He's a British lawyer, an OBE recipient, and the Director of Faith and Leadership. In the context of this discussion, he's a passionate advocate of the new Silk Road, linking India, the Middle East, and Britain. For Lord Krish, this is not a trade deal. It is a civilizational conversation. A huge round of applause for Lord Krish. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Right, okay. So I was looking for some rasamalai, gulab jamun, biryani for the lunch that we had. And there wasn't any, and I could see the result. So it was all very carefully orchestrated. We don't want you to be dozing off in a post-lunch session. But if we do see some of you dozing off, I'll take the liberty of thinking you are contemplating deep on what's being discussed on stage, right? So we'll just start the discussion. Well, it's an absolute honor, a pleasure to have both of you here on this panel for UK-India FTA. Today's panel discussion is both timely and commercially significant. The FTA between UK and India is about to go live as soon as next month. Signed here in July last year, after 3 years of negotiation, it's been finally ratified by the British Parliament and the Indian government and is just weeks away from implementation. What seemed like a distant potential is no longer as distant. In fact, it's a live unfolding event. And those amongst us ready to act would be the ones to be able to grab the first mover advantage. But before we dive into the discussion, maybe just to set the scene in terms of what this means, the scale of UK-India trade is already substantial. The bilateral trade between our two nations touched $56 billion in 2024, and both the nations are quite optimistic that we'll be able to more than double it to about $120 billion and more by 2030. Today, over 800 British companies operate in India, and as far as Indian businesses are concerned, we all know Indian businesses are one of the major employers here in the UK. However, despite of this deep two-way relationship, there is a sense that this partnership is underdeveloped. There's much more potential, and that's where the FTA could be a game changer. And we'll spend the next few minutes discussing with Amit Jain, who is a senior partner at EY, responsible for the India Trade Desk, and Chris Rowell, who has been instrumental in the Parliament to push through the FTA and make it happen in terms of how it all come together and what it means for all of us here. Lord Rowell, if I may, with your permission, the first question. The FTA was 3 years in the making, spanning 4 British Prime Ministers, 2 Indian general elections. What finally secured this agreement, and does the final deal reflect the right set of strategic priorities for the 2 countries?
Well, thank you for the question, Vinay, and how honored I am to speak here, and I thank ICAI for the kind invitation, and I find myself in this unusual position of being festooned between 2 eminent accountants. So please excuse me for being not technical in certain areas, but the FTA, I do know something about the history. So I think it was, and it's worth just dwelling on the context. So I think it was in 2021 that Boris Johnson, as Prime Minister, I think in May, said that as part of Britain's, the global Britain strategy post-Brexit, that we needed an FTA, and the economic arguments which you just set out, the case, is just unarguable. So it's really great for both nations. So what was the blockage? The blockage had to be political, had to be infrastructural. And so I may just dwell on that if you're interested in hearing that context. Would that be okay if I just talk to you about that? So that was they signed Modi ji and Boris signed something that said, that committed both countries towards looking at an FTA arrangement. And then a year later, in I think it was May 2022, Prime Minister Johnson, I think it was initially at a temple, a Hindu temple, but it was just one of his enthusiastic retorts. He said, we're going to sign it, we're going to have it done by Diwali of next year. Now, to the Indian side, it came across, it seems to me, as, well, they didn't ask us about this. And secondly, great, if they've committed to a particular deadline, we'll ask for everything we want. And that became the theme. So it became a proper contentious negotiation over this side against another, and kind of transactional. Well, not kind of, it was transactional. And I think the report actually came and said, some stage during the negotiations, that the Indians said they were the negotiations were 90% done, and the feedback was received in London that the Indians do not want a gun to their head. This is in terms of a deadline. So we're in no rush. And of course, there were electoral pressures in India, and all of this was happening. So then the government at the time had its own issues, and they recanted on this Diwali deadline. And then, of course, you saw the turbulence of Liz Truss and, Theresa May, and then Liz Truss, and all of that. So the eye was not on the ball. And then Prime Minister Sunak came in. And he, by instinct, is very, very cautious. So he was in no rush. He just wanted the right deal to be made. And the linchpin issues were visas and mobility for Indian professionals, whiskey and automotive tariffs, social security contributions, and market access for services. So those were the linchpin issues. Everything was agreed, but just there was a contention on these 5 areas. And the Indians knew that this government had to go, it was coming to the end of its cycle. So 4 prime ministers later, it was coming to the end of its cycle. So it could afford to wait. sometime towards the end of of Rishi Sunak's tenure, an unprecedented delegation went from the Labour Party. Now you've got to understand that, and you will know, that under Jeremy Corbyn, Labour did not have a very good relationship with the High Commission for India or India itself. You know that, right? So there was a real catch-up to be done. And the Prime Minister now, Keir Starmer, really was proactive in that. And it got to from the time where the High Commission would not share a stage with a Labour politician to the time when, I think it was in May before the general election, 2 people went to India and they were received at the highest levels. So, and that was the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, and then Jonathan Reynolds, who was the Business Secretary. And he, at that time, had 1 day left. My friend, who's part of my office, was part of their team. They all accompanied them, so I know this from firsthand. There's 1 day left, and Piyush Goyal agreed to meet Johnny Reynolds at something like midnight, or I don't know what it's like in India that they meet at midnight, but this is when, you wouldn't get a British MP here doing that. But anyway, so Johnny was willing to meet at midnight. It's a punishing tour, and they hit it off. And that relational situation was really influential. And do you know who under Rishi was the Secretary of State for the business at the time? It was one Kemi Badenoch, who is the leader of the opposition right now. So clearly there wasn't a chemistry between that business secretary and the Indian administration for whatever reason. So then we came in as, in the general election of last year, and I thought, wow, I'll have to really push hard for, the FTA. It wasn't needed. They were really, really committed, and maybe the fact that Rishi was from an Indian background and the Prime Minister was not, he wanted to prove that I could, I could push this through. And, Downing Street was very open to anyone who I suggested they should meet. So we had people from Niti Aayog, from various entities, and they would have open access to Downing Street and advisors and other people. And there was this constant stream of influx. And then the Indians then, and I think perhaps one of you can go into this, and I know I'm taking too long, but I just want to tell you the story just this little bit. The Indians were still playing hard to get, really hard to get. It was not. So even in May of last year, when the FTA was agreed, there was a delegation from FICCI, the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce. Was anyone? Were you part of that, or did you meet them when that delegation came? So you had Rajan Mittal and all these guys. So they all visited me after visiting Rachel Reeves and all these people in Downing Street, and they came and said, "This is absolutely impossible. You're not compromising on visas. We don't need the FTA. You do. This is not going to happen." And I thought, my God, this is not going anywhere. And then, so I prepared my own strategy, and I was about to, phone my contacts in the Prime Minister's office, and suddenly this news came that the FTA has been agreed. And I said, what? I've just met this delegation, and they're saying it's not happening, and how did this happen? And what happened was that Piyush Goyal and Jonathan Reynolds had been having secret meetings, quite aside from their immediate staff. And every time Piyush would go to Europe or something like that, my understanding is that he would come into London, Johnny Reynolds would make the sacrifice, go out of his way, stop whatever meeting he had to meet him. And the proof that this guy cared, and this is something cultural, if I may say, that from the Indian side, somebody who's from a working class family who's become Secretary of State, perhaps meant a lot more to somebody who's really Oxbridge and very posh and might speak down to officials. I have no idea, but he really showed humility. And the big thing was Piyush Goyal, if I understand correctly, loved Yes Minister, the television serial. And so he just mentioned it. And the first meeting Johnny had with him in one of these parks, they'd go on these walks, they'd choose a different park, is that he got a signed copy by the authors of Yes Prime Minister, and he presented it to Piyush Goyal. And this Piyush said, it just won my heart. So the personal, because the economic arguments were unassailable, but it's the personal that shone through. And I can tell you more. I mean, I was there for the signing. I spoke to Modi ji in my broken Gujarati, and that was great fun. He asked me actually in Gujarati, which part of Gujarat are you from? And I said, there's a street in Harrow that is more Gujarati than Jamnagar, and I'm from that street. And he laughed. Anyway, I hope that's of interest.
Well, thank you, Chris. There's so much behind the scenes. Thank you for sharing all of that, right from temple to Diwali to all the personal equation, relationship that underpins.
And can I say, my Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, did it by his first Diwali, just you know.
On that
Not being party political, but
right. So maybe I can, if I can bring you in, Amit. In terms of now that it's happening, I understand it becomes effective next month itself. What are some of the sectors that the British companies, the UK companies, stand to benefit the most from this FTA? And what could some of the risks be?
No, thank you, and thank you for the setup. I mean, I was part of that FICCI delegation, and we were sitting in the Taj room, I remember, and nobody knew what's going to happen. And I can feel that the personal relationship with Mr. Goyal and the secretary really played a huge role, because some of those issues were, nobody wanted to budge, right? So that was interesting. But coming back, I think as you mentioned at the start, like it's a pretty big deal. If you look at some of the sectors, whether it's alcohol beverage going down from 150% duty to 75%, then in 10 years 40%. If you look at medical devices or pharmaceuticals, a lot of them will come, significantly down. Cars subject to a quota from 100 to 10%. So some of the changes and services, which is close to all of them, there are about 130 services which will open up, right? So I think from an opportunity perspective, as when I mentioned, there's about $50-60 billion of trade expected to be double, and almost $25 billion within the first 2-3 years, right? So it's a matter of ratification. I'm really glad that things are moving fast, because for the last 6-8 months we've been telling the UK government that we are ready to ratify tomorrow, as long as you're ready. So I think that's really, really great. And if you look at the sectors, and some of the sectors, you're already seeing movement, right? And I'll start with education, right? India spends about, Indian students, $700 million on outbound education. That's 10 times more of the Indian education bill, right? The amount of money that government spends, right? So that's crazy. And obviously you would know with, all the visa challenges and whatnot, that's really impacted. Since the last, I would say 1 year, 17 universities have been allowed to, operate in India. And as some of you would know, Southampton has opened its campus in Gurgaon. York University is going to go to India. So there are about 8 British universities who are going to India, right? So that's one sector which you've seen already. And again, it's not that that sector didn't have activity. We had lots of collaborations, lots of joint research studies, etc. But this setting up a campus, and I've been in this corridor for a while, and if 10 years back I said that, set up a campus in India, people would laugh at me, but this is a reality, right? And that's happened pretty quickly, right? If I look at the next sector, right, Alcobev, where I do a lot of work, and it's very interesting. While there's a lot of UK companies really excited to go to India, but as some of you would know that there are a lot of Indian companies who also actually, on the single malt side, on some of the other beverages have gone up. And I've got a few Indian companies who are saying that, if there is a UK distillery, I'm happy to buy it. So it's opening up opportunities across the sector, right? The third sector, which I feel is going to have a huge potential, is going to be life sciences. So both, again, AstraZeneca and GSK are leading the way, but also we've got Serum on the other side, and we saw during COVID how that partnership really worked, right, between Oxford and Serum, and what the two governments could do. So that sector, both with the FTA opportunity, the Indian kind of growth opportunity is really, really going to grow and going to have significant opportunities on both sides, right? Because the UK research and development capabilities are still quite significant, which India sort of lacks. And I think India has the scale in terms of manufacturing, but also the consumer sector. So that's going to be a huge game changer, right? And the last sector that I want to mention, and I can go on for a while, but I'm just picking up 4 or 5 big ones, or maybe one more I'll pick. Consumer sector. Today we have 300 million middle-class consumers in India, right? Thriving economy. If I just tell you what has happened in the 12 to 18 months, 2 big reforms have happened, which maybe not everybody's realized, but last year, and we are all room of chartered accountants, in the budget, it changed the personal tax slab. What that did is that put more money in pockets, right? And this year, they changed the GST slabs and brought it down. Again, more money in pockets. It's about $200 million or so of, give or take of, but that's the impetus which is going indirectly and more consumer spend, right? One of the fastest growing consumer market, expected to be about 500 million consumers by 2030, right? So it's a thriving market, and if you look at some of the existing companies, right, whether it's M&S, what they're doing in India, whether it's Pret a Manger, I mean, there's a significant growth in terms of some of the retail companies, right? And the last sector that I want to mention about is clean tech, right? India is today at 250 gigawatts of clean energy, expected to get to 500 gigawatts by 2030, right? And while UK has not had the best record in terms of setting up new kind of windmills or solar kind of panels, etc., but I think the technology and the innovation that is in UK, that can really help to drive some of the growth in India. And we've already seen the British Sovereign Wealth Fund, BII, has invested over $2 billion in that sector, right? So, those are the 4-5 sectors I'm very, very bullish about. And for obvious reason, I think that throws a lot of opportunity for this community, right? Because I think end of the day, there's a lot of navigational support that is required. Obviously, India is not an easy country to operate, we all know, but I think it's people in this room who can really make a huge change and really help make that journey easy, right? But I think this is probably the best time, and I was joking with Vinay that somebody on the other side of the pond has helped us to get more closer.
Can I just add?
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with this. There's the Sovereign AI Fund too. So AI is an absolutely burgeoning field, and Kanishka Narayan is Britain's AI minister, and you should have seen him in Delhi for the summit. He was so proactive and was so encouraging of bilateral partnerships based on that aspect of tech as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And while we spoke about all the British companies who benefit from this, it's a great deal from an Indian consumer perspective as well, right? And you spoke about automobile, education, all the universities being set up, and of course, single malt for all our friends and relatives out there in India who are the single malt lovers. I think it's great that they could get some really nice ones out there. They don't have to wait, take their flight and go to duty free. Well, thank you for that, Amit. Now, just flipping this on its head and looking on the other side of the table, which is like, what about the Indian firms? How do they benefit from this FTA? What are some of the interesting or attractive sectors that they could get in the UK market?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, the macro picture, right? I would say on the mobility side, that's been a huge change, right? That was a big ask from the Indian side that to relax some of the social security contributions, right? So that's got relaxed for short-term travelers. I think that just between, if I look at the big five in India, right? So Infosys, TCS, Wipro, and we add them, that's going to be billions of dollars of saving, because that was lost money, and that makes, access to the market much, much easier, right? So that's number one. In terms of examples, again, Infosys is just a little shy of $2 billion of contract with NHS, right? So that's the opportunity which we are already seeing, right? In the last few years, I've realized the amount of work Tech Mahindra has been doing here. They've got a huge innovation center. XUV 500 was partly built out of here. And I was in a session with one of their R&D heads, and he said that UK will be the first market where they actually will launch XUV 500 if they were to go get overseas, right? So similarly, while Ola didn't have success on its ride-hailing cars, but they've got a huge R&D center outside of UK, which is doing quite well. I mentioned about Serum. They continue to do a lot of investments with Oxford on research and studies, etc. We've already seen Reliance to some of the, whether it's joint ventures with British companies for retail investments into India, but also other way, right? We also saw the big deal that they did with Hamleys, etc. Tata is no surprise to, the amount of investments they have, right from automotive to other sectors. So I think there's going to be a huge opportunity for Indian companies, but more importantly, what I'm really bullish about is the services sector, right? I think that's going to have a huge opportunity, and I'm sure the prior panel to lunch must have spoken about it, but to me, the capital market opportunity, and there's a specific mention within the FTA on how there's going to be collaboration between Gift City Capital Stock Exchange and the LSE to kind of look at dual listing. Dual listing is a bit complicated to the main exchange in India, but very much possible at Gift City, right? And that's really going to open up a lot of opportunity. And again, if you look at the current, take out the first 3 months, the last 3 months due to the war and whatnot, but the Indian capital market has been really booming, and I think that creates a lot of opportunity, right? And the last point I would make is a lot of the Indian unicorns, right, who've really grown the last 2-3 years, and we meet a lot of them, they are telling us that we need to kind of, look at overseas markets, and you like it or not, UK is the first market, and, I would say generally as Indians, we love to be in UK, and I often hear this pretty much from every Indian, but also some of the other colleagues from other countries, that Indian food is best in India or in London.
Can I just quickly just piggyback? I agree with everything you said, and just to say, the City of London, the regional argument, the City of London, but also some of the mayors of the other cities around the country, they are so welcoming of India. There are all sorts of delegations being planned, region to region, in order to attract investment and also to look after these cultural concerns. It really is important.
Yeah, no, great two-way opportunity. Well, so I'm being signaled that we are short on time because we have got a packed agenda this afternoon. But we have Lord Raoul here, and I can't let the opportunity go. So at the cost of angering my dear friends Ajay and Vineet, I'm going to take one more question here, Lord Raoul. So basically, going back to this morning's leadership discussion, leadership talk by Anil Agarwal, we all heard about when he made that £100,000 loss. What did he do? Does anybody remember? So he tried to cut a deal with God, right? And went to the temple and offered 1,000 on one pocket and 2,500 another, if he was to square off that, And we all do that, right? We are all professionals. We may not have the billions like Anil Agarwal have, but we do have the same pain and the challenges and the conflicts in our day-to-day life. And Lord Raoul here, he practices interfaith leadership, at the intersection of spirituality and leadership. And if I could ask this question from you, Chris, in terms of what will be your advice to all the colleagues, the fraternity out here, in terms of how to deal with this kind of situation and not having to go to God only when it's like, the last resort?
Well, firstly, just to say, our community in Britain is really upwardly mobile, very, very successful. And the secret, I think it was the journalist Palki Sharma who I interviewed her the other day. And she said it so beautifully. She said, acquire skills, but don't lose your sanskar. And I really adhere to that. We have so much to contribute as a community, but we don't speak about it. And so if I may, just three prescriptions. One, I see other communities, I won't mention whom, but I see other communities in politics, in House of Lords, other places, and some of them are overrepresented compared to their size, but they're there because of competence. You take their faith identity away, they're still there because they're really, really competent. So I'm really keen to get people of our background in politics, and if you look at my maiden speech, it was about opening doors. I don't want to be one of these politicians who says, look at me, and close down the bridges for others. I want to open doors. I want lots and lots of people of our background and other backgrounds to be in politics. But I want them to be there because of competence. And my understanding of competence is that you don't lose. You're both professional, but you also have your sanskar. And that matters a lot in this society where we're in an identitarian situation. Right now, I'm speaking to the Prime Minister's office about this anti-Muslim hostility definition. I was not for it because I thought all the faiths needed one, but now I'm pushing for an anti-Hindu hostility definition, and somebody else and this will matter in the corporate space. So I am a politician. If you could help me in this, I'd be very grateful.
Thank you so much, Chris. Well, so that's what we have time for this afternoon, but it's been an absolute pleasure. The way things are in terms of geopolitics, trade rebalancing that we see across the world, the FTA is not just a commercial objective, but a strategic necessity for our two nations. And I think the FTA heralds a new era in terms of opportunity, innovation, and long-term sustainable growth for our two countries.
Vinay, can I just say one thing? I forgot that. Can I just ask people from my office, please, to stand? So Kanti and Rakesh, you just stand up. If I could be of use to anyone, could you approach these guys? They're from my team. We're here to help, and anything we can do, reasonably we will. So just approach them, and we'll try and help. I really do want to be a listening ear. Sorry, Vinay.
No, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Amit. Thank you so much, Lord Raval. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.